here's your host, Alex Garrett.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, there we go. In 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, I don't really often have a deal maker like this one on my podcast, but Myron Welik, when I hear you're affiliated with Heidi Klum, Madison Square Garden, the New England Patriots, I have to bring you on my show, One Leg Up with Alex Garrett. And Myron Welik, thanks for joining me straight from podcastguest.com.
Oh, it's an honor. Straight from Montreal, Canada. That's where I am. So, and talking to the Big Apple. That's my wife is from Brooklyn, so I love the Big Apple. In one of my lives, I was born there without me knowing I was born there. But it's an honor to be here, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
Ironically, I was at the Garden to see the Rangers take on the Canadians not too long ago. So how about that?
That's a classic rivalry. But lately, I can't brag too much about it because we're not playing the Canadians, the famous Canadians. We're the dynasty, and certainly the most glorified hockey team, winner of more Stanley Cups than anybody else. But those days are on hold for a little while now.
A little bit, although the Carey Price years were something to watch. All right, we can talk sports all day. In fact, we might because you've got some connections into the sports world. But tell us about Myron Welik, for those who may not know. I mean, you've reinvented yourself
Right.
As a businessman. I want to talk about that reinvention right here, right now.
Right. No, I'd love to. So basically, I'm 71 going on 51. They call me the Jackhammer. And in the next few minutes, it'll be clear why. I probably have more energy than most people in their 20s and 30s, but I am 71. So when I was 49, bottom line is, I'll just give the highlights. I had a business of 20 odd years, and unfortunately, I lost it for a lot of reasons. But most of all, I didn't run the business the way I should have run it in terms of reinventing myself, adapting, and expanding properly. And eventually it caught up with me. And at 49, I lost it. And going, it was rough to say the least, not just for all the obvious reasons, Alex, the money and all that, but I had no idea, that I would, almost lose myself. So I wrote an article for a newspaper and I called it Starbucks Orphans because I spent the first year vegetating in Starbucks. Because the thing about a coffee shop, Starbucks or anywhere, is you can go there and be anonymous. It's like an orphan. If you want to talk to people, you can. If not, you don't have to. And they don't bother you. You can sit there all day with the same cup of coffee, generally speaking, or they could back then. So that was, needless to say, not a fun experience. It took me about 16 years to reinvent myself. It wasn't until 67 years old. The two things, and many, many, many times during that 16 years, I felt like either ending it all, I was on too many pills, like anxiety helping pills. I would suffer from tremendous, tremendous anxieties. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. Well, but I don't, because anxiety, very serious, devastating anxiety, as anybody who's experienced it knows, it's like you're having a heart attack. I used to fall to the floor in the showers, not knowing until I understood, because it never happened to me before. But it came, for stress and all the bad stuff. But it was very severe, very severe. I used to lock myself in the car, go to a park here called, like a Central Park here, it's called Beaver Lake, and kind of in the summer, I'll lock the windows, not put the air conditioning in. It really was a bad time, tough time. I did the odd jobs and shining shoes, cleaning carpets for offices and banks at night. But this was for 16 years, not 16 weeks or 16 days or 1 year. So again, it wasn't until 67, but some reason, somehow I never surrendered. And probably for two reasons, and I really don't know why. Eventually, I helped myself to get out of it. Two major things that I would suggest to anybody going through hell. And then, like Churchill says, when you're going through hell, keep going. And, to the point is because one is I would, for some reason, I'd get up every morning. I would not sleep in, because that was like an anathema, to me. I would not sleep in, a curse to me, as if I was going somewhere. Generally, I was not, or not going anywhere very exciting. But I did, wearing a shirt, not as a tie, wear a shirt and pants, as if I was going to an office, or a business or work. But I did go to a lot of networking events, meaning where principally inhabited by people under 30, in their 20s, 30s, let's say, or even in their early 30s. And these are all young entrepreneurs going to brainstorm, collaborate, and there's networking events in every city, Montreal, New York, Chicago, everybody has them. And they continue to have them. And they're great meetups where they mainly talking about technology, principally IT, because that was the vast majority we're talking. And basically they're all full of excitement and optimism. Remember, these are people in their 20s and 30s. They better be, right? So they're filled with the future, as the expression goes. And it rubbed off on me. So it was great. So, and the other thing that helped me get through it, I'm very fortunate that I have this woman from Brooklyn who I've been married now, actually tomorrow, we're married 37 years, and she stuck with me. So all I can say to anybody, if you're lucky enough, very lucky enough to have someone love you, no matter who it is or what it is, you have someone you can't wait to come home to, it comes in handy at times. So
Myron, this is very interesting. I wanted to say, you want to be anonymous at a Starbucks. Now, what would drive you to want to be anonymous? Were there people after you after the business fell, or
no? I want to be anonymous because I didn't want to talk to anybody.
Wow.
Yeah,
And that was part of the anxiety, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that was all the anxiety. I didn't want to talk to anybody, so I wanted to be myself. So basically, and what happened also is it took me, like I said, it took me 16, 17 years to reinvent myself. And basically, one day in one of these networking events, there was a guy in real estate there, and he basically he shouldn't have been there. He was in the early 30s, building a young entrepreneur, building his real estate business. He needed help. I helped him in terms of finding extra dollars, and then it moved on. He needed help in finding properties. I helped him find properties. And then I realized there's a skill I could find, I could help others, and I've expanded since then.
Well, I do love that you've gotten back into helping. I think that's sort of a pay it forward in a sense for you, is like making other dreams happen. But I want to talk about your dream. So how did you at 67 become back on top from multi-million-dollar, catastrophe back to $40 million of real estate investments? I mean, come on, that's a great rebound.
Yeah, that was, I don't know if on top, but that was over 4 years now it's been, and close to 4 years, and it's been by my investors, and it's just been by being a jackhammer, by helping them find opportunities that make sense for them up market. It speaks to my skills by being what's the word, tenacious, being creative, kind of reinvent the business and focusing. And there's an opportunity there in finding these opportunities for potential investors. It's not my investments; it's these investors who are buying mainly apartment buildings is the main focus, Alex.
I feel like in those 16 years, you had to really get that eye back for going out with that tenacity, right? Going out for the tenacity. So while you're cleaning in the carpets, while you're doing all this other stuff, did you feel that tenacity building inside you? Like, okay, I'm going to do bigger than this one day, once again.
It's a great question, but I just didn't want to die. You know what I mean? I just didn't want to die. I wasn't ready to give up yet. And I don't know why or how. And I kept going, even though there were so many days when there was no hope around the corner. I mean, every day looked like the other. Today looked like yesterday, the day before, and the week before. And there was no reason to keep going. Like I said, well, why would I keep going? Why? I mean, it didn't look like, 16 years is a hell of a long time to try to turn things around for anybody, whether you start at 20 or 50 or 60. So there's good reason not to keep going. And there's good reason probably to give up because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better, because it's not getting any better.
Well, for you, though, you become this deal maker once again. And did some of these deals happen for you during the last 3 years, like say with the Patriots or even the Garden, or was that prior to?
There's two things. One is real estate happened in the last 4 years, since 671. Yeah, last 4 years real estate, and the strategic partnerships also happened in the last 3-4 years. The Heidi Klum New Balance happened in 2010 or 12. That was a very interesting scenario that happened while I was going through hell, but it still happened because the people I was working with then had the rights, the world rights, Alex, to Heidi Klum, and she was just finished her pregnancy with Seal at just about 2010, 2012. She was married to him then, and they were looking for another opportunity. I suggested to a running shoe brand, athletic brand, and she loved the idea. And then she said, kind of like, come up with some suggestions. At that point, I did my research, my homework, and I saw that New Balance was not a public company. I suggested it. She liked the idea. It took me 6 months, maybe more, to reach out and finally contact people. This is all cold. And then a year and a half later, if I remember correctly, they made the partnership HKNB. The New England Patriots came about when CEO, who's a very famous singer, some of your audience may or may not know, was married to Heidi Klum one time. He's not. And he this was during COVID, actually. And he loved the New England Patriots. I don't know why, but he did. Maybe he comes from England. And he knew a lot about football. And so I reached out to, he said he'd be interested in maybe some kind of partnership. I reached out to New England Patriots cold. I did contact them. I did connect with them, believe it or not, all on their cells because it was COVID. Nobody was in the office, if you remember then. And I did reach out, and we did have a Zoom with Seal. They love Seal. It went extremely well, but he wanted more dollars than they were willing to pay. So unfortunately, it didn't work out. Otherwise, they were looking for him to sing the national anthem. So it's pretty cool.
Well, let me ask you this, because it sounds like you've had two sides of the coin. For me, to take a year and a half to sell, the Heidi Klum brand to New Balance sounds kind of crazy. She's Heidi Klum. Why does it take so long? But at the flip side, it's maybe inspiring others. Okay, if you just keep at it, you too can stay connected to people like Heidi Klum. It works both ways. You see what I'm thinking here?
Both parties have to bring something to the table, Alex, that together they're stronger or they're more powerful, or it's more lucrative, more attractive to the audience, which it was. Shoe brands in the world, the quality is up second to none, even in the Nike, Adidas of the world, which are all great footwear people. There's no question, been around forever. New Balance is iconic, been around since early 1900s. They make one of the best running shoes in the world. There's no question, one of the best. Heidi Klum has an opportunity to connect with a well-known, established, iconic brand and take the fashion apparel, which really wasn't their forte, and marry it with a well-known name so it gets instant recognition. So it's a win-win. It's extremely gratifying and exciting. I mean, Heidi Klum New Balance has been around the longest, and that's what I think its name is still out there since 2010, 2012. So what is that, 12 years or something? Mm-hmm. It's crazy. So that's great. I'm glad. I mean, because a lot of times, they don't last for a lot of good reasons. They've run the course, you run out of energy, run out of relevancy. It's still around. It's probably not the same potency and power that it was 12 years ago, but that's okay. It goes up and down, it evolves, it has highs and lows. The fact that it's, and it changes because it has, especially in the fashion business, as you well know, has to change and adapt to the times.
I want to point out that you had written that what you've dealt with prior to all that for those years after your multi-million-dollar business collapsed was paralyzing. Of course, I deal with those, and I'm friends with those who are really paralyzed disability-wise, but talk about the mental paralysis that one might find themselves in and can adapt to or adapt in ways that they get away from it, if you will.
I'm an example that there is life after death, so to speak, and there is an opportunity. And maybe ironically, Alex, by going through that hell, it's maybe stronger and better and more prepared for what I'm trying to do now. Maybe, who knows? It doesn't matter.
This is so important for people that, we mentioned COVID, 4 years, here we are. I find that some have not been able to recover from that disaster and pandemic. Have you found that you've been advising those who have also felt that paralysis due to COVID and talking them through it?
That's a good question too, Alex. Whether it's COVID or something else, I work very hard today. The only way I can answer that, it may not be satisfactory for anybody, is that I work very hard to see, and it may sound cliche-ish and naive, to make sure the glass is half full, not half empty. So I'm an optimist by definition. Maybe that's another reason why I survived. And because if I wasn't an optimist, I never would have survived. There's no question. So I believe no matter how dark things are, and they can get very dark, that there is a silver lining. Now, maybe that's a cliche, and maybe that's naive. Call it what you want, but it has worked for me in terms of survival, and then after survival to try to prosper. I think that's essential. They call it mindset, right? I guess. I think without that, you're going to have a lot of trouble to deal with any any form of adversity. Could be very small, very minor, or major. In fact, I don't know how you're able to. I don't know if that.
And people talk to me and say, "How do you overcome your, rolling on one leg?" And
Right.
it doesn't feel like overcoming. I just try and stay positive about it, and I am positive about it. So, it's amazing. Those who are well off, might go through a lot more than I do. Isn't that weird? I think that's an interesting kind of world we live in.
No, because I also don't change what I can. People talk about the weather. It's the same thing. The fuck, what the hell are they talking about the weather for? I mean, it's freezing cold. There's a lot of snow. It's very humid. It's very damp. I don't. Okay, so I don't talk about that. I can't control it. I don't want to hear about it really. Except to know what's going on, so I know what to dress and what I can do. Yeah. From a practical point of view, yeah, of course I want to know the weather. I have to know the weather in terms of where I'm going, what I'm doing, what I'm planning, and that's the end of it. But it's not a conversation for me. I'm not interested. A lot of things are not a conversation. I'm not going to talk about how should I say? I don't know. I'm very discriminative. I want the conversations to matter. Generally speaking, I don't have the time.
You're not a small talk kind of guy, then. In other words,
no, not generally. No.
And let me ask you: is that how people are successful when they get away from the small talk and say, "All right, what are we talking about with this real estate deal?" Or let's get down to brass tacks. That seems like your kind of motto here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everybody has family, and there's ordinary. Sometimes the ordinary things are extraordinary things, and you have to savor it. I mean, one of my best loves is my dog. My dog Brooklyn. She's Brooklyn Wheaton Terrier. She's 3.5 years old, and I love her to crumbs. But I think what's important is to keep the mind focused on whatever you want to do. In my case, it's real estate or whatever I want to achieve, and not to let myself be emotionally or mentally distracted. Correct. I think so, and I think anybody trying to do big things or great things or have very serious ambitions, whatever they may be in his or her life, it takes a lot of mental power, right? It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of focus, and you don't want to lose too much time on distraction. There's a very famous expression that says, do whatever you want to do. Make sure you do whatever you want to do in life, because one day you'll wake up, there won't be any more time to do it. And that's whether you're 20 years old or you're 80 years old.
Well, you're now in your 70s, feeling like
71.
your 40s, and 71, feeling like you're 50 and even younger. So, obviously, you feel like you still got a lot of time left on this earth. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, I don't control that. So what my attitude is, I treat each day with a sense of urgency. Anything can happen health-wise. As long as I have my health, of course, like you, I can do what I need to do. Without it, of course, it's an axiom. I'm screwed. So I don't know, there's no question, like anything, as you get older in life, more stuff happens medically and physically. It's just a fact. I can't control that or change that. So much stronger, powerful people than me have deteriorated and continue to deteriorate. As we see, as people age, if you watch them and see photos of great stars and all that in their 20s, 30s, and 70s and 80s, it's just, unfortunately, it is part of life, no matter what and at this point. So until science figures out, which they probably will, by the way, I think, how to slow that down dramatically, people will live longer. I have no doubt that's going to happen. But for now, in 2024, 2025, it's just, I'm very cognizant of my age and my health, and I have to leverage that and take advantage of it as long as I can, because I don't know when that's going to end.
I don't know if you want to get political here. We don't have to, but obviously age is a big deal in 2024. Are you almost thinking like, is age really, is it disappointing to you that's become a talking point in politics as well? I want to ask you that.
No, it's not. Because quite frankly, I think at late 70s and all that, I think he's done. I mean, I think it's a tough age to be the president, the most powerful man in the world. There's no question. It's very tough. So if he lasts 4 years in his 80s, it's very challenging. I have mixed opinions. No. I mean, there's no doubt. I don't know even now how the man endures it at 77 or 78, what he is, how he endures the pace. Because if you look at much younger men, when the 40s or 50s became president, look at them in the beginning and look at them when they finished the 4 years only. They're not the same person. And understandably so. With the weight, literally, of the world 24/7 on your shoulders, no matter where you go, what you do, everywhere in the world. And now it's just more than ever. I don't know how he functions. I don't know how he maintains. I just don't know. It's mind-boggling how he still is as good of it seemingly, in spite of all the issues and people talk about his articulation. And it's miraculous with everything that he has to endure and be, because he's the president of the United States of America. It's mind-boggling. He's able to function the way he is.
All right. Well, it's so true. And by the way, I suggest you read something you wrote in a Florida publication not too long ago that you sent me also, Myron. We should talk about that.
The 40 ways to stay young.
40 ways. You should send that to the White House. Maybe that'll help him. I don't know, but that's very interesting.
I'd love to send it to the White House. Actually, I think, you know what? The challenge always is, Alex. I think President Biden, would love it. I definitely think he would love it. And if I met him, I think we get along very well. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with his politics. I'm talking as a person. I'm not going into that. That's not the point of the podcast. We're talking him as a human being now. Coffee with coffee. But I think he would love it. I think his wife would love it. I think a lot of people would love it. But whether you're 30 or 40 or 80 or 90, I think people love it. You don't have to be 70 or 80 to love it. But I think he would. I think you're right. I don't think
my dad was a vibrant 85, and actually cancer took him out last year, unfortunately, but he was a vibrant 85. And I always love to see people in that age range to keep going. You know, that means a lot, because I saw my dad do that also. He was like a hero in that way for me.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. You know, one of the things in the 40 ways, I don't know if you had a chance to look through it, is I say one of the 40 ways is listen to the Beatles as much as you can. I think the Beatles should be mandatory listening before the Pledge of Allegiance every day.
Well, you know, this is interesting because I feel like you're helping us keep the brain stay young, and music does actually help those who have dementia and whatnot. And I want to say, you can impact those people as well just by this influence. I mean,
especially the Beatles.
You can help brain stay young.
Especially the Beatles, because you know the music generally is catchy, singable, it's simple, it's very upbeat, positive, talking about the right themes. Generally, you can't help it, whether it was composed in the 60s or I don't know, whenever they did in the 80s and later. You can't help but jump around and get excited and feel good listening to them. You got to be dead not to be able to be excited listening to them.
All right, I gotta imagine this is featured on the Jackhammer Effect. These 40 ways. Have you talked about it on your podcast?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't. I just kind of composed it a little while ago, and one of the ways also was, I think I said, find someone that you can't wait to come home to. I mean, there's 40 different things, and I think they're all very doable by anybody. You know, you don't need to be a billionaire. You don't have to be anything. You could be anybody. You just got to do them. Like everything else, you just got to do them as much as possible.
Well, you've had a wife of 37 years. And so let's go back to the catastrophe of 2002 when you lost your business. How was she there for you? And was she frustrated with you at times because of maybe decisions you made, or was she always loving no matter what?
No, she was always there. She just was always there, because it was just, you know, as time go on, 12 years, 15 years, you know, I think she just got frustrated. The point is, but it was good frustration, is that she encouraged me to get myself together and find a path for myself, do something. And she encouraged me in that way, and was very forthright in a very positive, constructive way, not mincing words. And that's good, because, you know, what you can expect and hope from people that love you, whether it's a wife, husband, it doesn't matter, friend, is constructive criticism and encouraging construct. That's worth a lot. That's important.
Well, my stubborn self is learning that with my fiance. She sets me straight a lot, and I really appreciate that, because it's needed. You know,
I mean, you need that, as long as it's constructive, and when you know they're right, and it's coming from someone that really gives a damn whether you live or die. It's urgent that you hear it, because, you know, a lot of times we realize it, but we don't realize it. So we need that.
I want to get into so I want to get more into the podcast though. What do you talk about on and in your book, The Jackhammer Effect?
Right. The book is The Jackhammer Effect: How to Break Down Doors and Make Business Deals Happen for Those Who Believe They Can't. It's really very much geared, Alex, towards people early stages, just starting out, or early stages in their business. Entrepreneurs, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. It's kind of a workbook guide from A to Z on if you're just starting to conceive the idea of what your business is, test out your business, and then how to try to find customers for your business, what to do to help you find customers, and if you do find interest, to help you how to conduct the meeting with them, and then hopefully some ideas on how to close, some thoughts about strategic partnerships, and then I think it just brings you, and it's kind of a workbook that leaves you spots, places, lines where you could include and write your own thoughts. So you can tailor the book, because every businesses are different. It's a generic guideline and inspiration, hopefully, of my own experiences and what I lived through and where my thoughts are. But it could definitely be, there's definitely room to curate it and tweak it for someone's individual journey, which will be obviously different than mine.
Do you have any kids that you've seen grow up and help you through all of these tough times as well? As your child.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Do you have any kids as well that have
Yes.
seen you through the tough times and gotten you through
No,
that?
well, my kids, fortunately, my son is 33, I think, and my daughter's 31, and we're closer than ever. I was born to be a father. We're very close. They're good. My son's great. He's an entrepreneur. My daughter is a occupational therapist. They're both good. They're both great, thank God, and we're as close as ever with them. They have their own lives. They do their own thing, but I work very hard because I think kids are, so I call them a snapshot of heaven. For me, I don't think it's for everybody. I agree, it's not. But it's like dogs, it's not for everybody. You really have to be dedicated and loving it to be able to put up, because it's like having another kid. As anybody who has a dog knows, there's no question. It demands a lot, like kids, awful lot, dogs. So it's full time, almost. So for me, it's easy with that because I love them to bits, and my dog. So it's easy, and I love spending time with them. So I was fortunate to have them, in my opinion. I wanted them, and I'm fortunate to have them.
When people hear the word jackhammer, they think, what an aggressive way to go about life and to go and do it and get it done. And do you think being a jackhammer, and I apply this to One Leg Up, is a great way to have one leg up on life? Because that's the whole meaning of this podcast, is to bring on people who have one leg up on life. And you seem like you've been a jackhammer on your way to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, basically all it means is, never giving up, keep going until hopefully you reach or whatever you want to keep going. It's what the word persistence, tenacious, stubborn, all those words are the same as a jackhammer. It's just a very graphic word that everybody knows. I think just about everybody knows, even though it's a real estate construction, terminology. There's a physical machine that actually jackhammers into a hard surface, a very cement or whatever the surface is, where other machines fail to puncture, the jackhammer does. That's why I suppose it was invented. But the metaphor is obvious for life, and it's a kind of word that is very peculiar to that machine and known all over the world when you say the word jackhammer. So one of these words that means one thing, basically, the machine, which in turn means never giving up, keep going, be tenacious, resilient, all those things.
All right, I gotta get into the local venues here. Madison Square Garden, what's your involvement with them? And did that include James Dolan? I'm very curious.
No, I don't know if it was. What happened is there was an app in New York that brought me on board several years ago. It's not around, a tourist app. It was a startup, I think, in 2018 or 2019. And they were struggling to find customers in New York City, based app for New York, for tourists coming to New York, which is, one of the most visited cities in the world. And this was before COVID. And they brought me on board on a contractual basis to help them find strategic partners that would, help them bring customers in. A major New York iconic venues and attractions. So that's what I did. I reached out to, after a lot of work and everything, I suggested Madison Square Garden. They thought I was crazy, not because they didn't love the idea. They just never thought they'd reach out to them. They were, remember, a young small startup. And so I reached out to them. They own, as you know, Radio City Music Hall, the same people. So they came on. Then I also, as I'm sure you're familiar with, Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. They were also people we reached out to and created partnerships. Plus, there was a bunch of CPD, breweries, smaller. There was a gym, a couple other people, all of course in Manhattan, that we reached out to and created partnerships whereby any of their customers, the people come there would get a discount. If they use the app advertised them on their discount. So, these places, the high profile ones are a lot better known than the app. So it was good while it lasted. The app lasted a couple of years, and then there's COVID and other things. They packed it in. But we did make them work, and they worked while they did. And I think the reason why a big giant like Madison Square Garden is not because they needed publicity or they would certainly make any money, but I think they generally wanted to help. There was no other practical reason, and they thought, and they could help, and they'd like to contribute to young New York based, of course, so it was relevant. It wasn't Chicago or Philadelphia. Nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't. So it was a Manhattan based business.
Speaking of Manhattan based and startups and whatnot, why are youngsters, if you will, having trouble starting their business and really launching it? What's different now starting a business than it was maybe 40 years ago when you really got into this to begin with?
I don't think it's any less difficult or more difficult now. I think it should be even less. Quite frankly, back in my day, Alex, today you can do it on very minimum cost because of the internet and all that online. That never existed. So there were hard costs. It was very difficult. It was just difficult, almost impossible. You had to, depending on the person, it was just as difficult starting a business then as there were today. The back then, but probably there are a lot of there was less of everything. So and a lot of things that exist today are commonplace, didn't exist back even as late as the 70s or 80s. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's any less or any more. I think again, what generally, what the same kind of skills as an entrepreneur are needed. It's just what you do with these skills and where you apply them obviously are different when having an online world and social media, which of course are mobile phones, which was non-existent even into the 90s. As we know, even the early 30s, it was just starting. It was very early in the game, so all that was very late. So I think it's personally, I would think it's easier. There are a lot more, but because there's a lot more, they're flooded. There's so much of everything out there. So you have to struggle to figure out how to be heard above the noise. So that's why it's extremely difficult. But not so much to start, I think, Alex, not so much to get going, but to last and survive and to execute, to figure it out, because even with social media, I'm sure 99%, even though you have all these tools, but 99% of the people don't have many followers, don't have much to do. And even that's almost impossible to get known for the average person. You have exceptions, millions here, hundreds. But I think if you counted it up compared to the amount of people out there, the billions worldwide, very, very few. So the bottom line is it comes down to the difference is the individuals again, I think, who's doing it like it was 40, 50 years ago. The tools have radically changed. Of course they have. But adjusting for 2024 versus 1994 or 1974, I would think I would say it's easier. Easy is a bad word to use. It's more accessibility. It's more democratic. There's more opportunity, and it's universal because of the explosion of the internet. There's no question in my mind it should be.
Oh, no doubt about that, Myron. Now, I also feel like I come on this podcast sometimes, and I want you to either challenge me or agree with me here. I just feel like the entrepreneurial spirit for those in my generation have sort of been cut down because of the phone. I feel like there's not many people wanting to roll up their sleeves because they don't know how to. They're a little discouraged by inflation. I mean, how can you, as a seasoned veteran, encourage us to roll our sleeves back up and get back out there and do it and start that business today?
Yeah, that's very difficult. That's a great point. You're absolutely right. It's a great point because there's so much to be said by all that. But I come back to the same thing. I think the savvy young entrepreneur, he or she who's driven, ambitious, creative, resilient, you have to have the same qualities. You have to have 20, 30, 40, 50. You always have the similar qualities. The methodologies change, versus when Rockefeller built his oil empire. I mean, you had to have certain qualities. There only was one Rockefeller to do what he did, obviously. Yes, it was 1885, but it doesn't matter. He had to deal with what he had to deal with back in 1885. He wasn't the only one trying to build a business. I'm sure there were tons of people doing it. Everything is relative. That's what I'm saying. It's like rent or the money you make and everything. You can't compare. Everything is relative. But I come back to the same thing. I think the entrepreneurs that have the skills or the ability or figure it out, they'll do whatever they got to do, whether that's rolling up the sleeve, whether it's that how to get funding, whether it's that learning how to start with a small MVP, whatever that may be. They'll figure out what to do, or persevering and never give up, or coming back when they fail 100 times. So whether it's 2024, 1994, 1964, or 1884, it doesn't matter. I believe the same skills basically are needed for what's called an entrepreneur.
And then for you, you just mentioned it's so competitive, and I feel like that as a podcaster, you and we got to find ways to stand out in the podcast world. So I feel like you are helping those who are 65 plus reinvent themselves, and not many out there doing that. So how do you stand out though amongst your competition, if you will, if you have any in the podcast world?
Yeah, I think the two things you just said a key word. Whether you're 20, you gotta be able to, and that goes for not just for business, of course, for life. If you can't adapt and reinvent yourself, you're gonna die before your time. You're just gonna break. It's like you're gonna snap. I mean, I may be saying the obvious, but that's exactly what's going to happen. So those who are able to, number one, you have to reinvent yourself, and then you have to persevere, because you may fail 5 times, but you got to keep going. Even Macy's in this bloody department store, I think he failed 7 times before he built it. So what are we talking about different from 1890 when he first built the first Macy's near Harrods or in Manhattan somewhere, which he did? I think he failed 7 times. Woolworth failed the first 3 or 4 times, the famous Woolworth Company in 1890, until they opened up, I think, in Syracuse or Buffalo, New York. It finally succeeded. It did not succeed, sir, right away. Most did not succeed right away. Some get instant success, get lucky, like today, and others go through 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and you got to stick with it, or just don't die. Keep going. So, and that's going back to what, 1880s, 1890s? Come on. So it's 100 plus years, 150 years ago. It's insane. So it's a similar story, just for 1884, not 2024. A very similar story, what these guys would do. So why did Macy survive and not? I'm sure he wasn't the only one back then who wanted to build a clothing or apparel or whatever a department store looked like back. He couldn't have been the only one. It was impossible. I'm sure many didn't make it, just like today. So going back to today, you still need any young entrepreneur. 18, 19, you got to remember, you're in for hell until you find something. You got to be able to, but you also got to want it badly. And you got to have the self-confidence to believe in yourself, or you're dead. And you also got to want it more than you want to work for someone else. And you put in the hours. Those things are prerequisites. Not a lot of people have them. Not everybody has them. If you don't have them, I don't see how. It's like being like it's fighting a wrestling match with 2 arms tied behind your back. You're not going to have much chance of success.
All right. Well, in that vein, I know that all these empires, those that built the empires like a Ray Kroc and R.H. Macy and whatnot, and Woolworth, they all took risks. So I got to ask you, were there risks you wish you didn't take, or do you have no regrets? I mean, talk about your risk taking that even got you to rebound from 2002 as well.
No, I just basically saying, I can't recall anything vividly, Alex. It's just, there is definitely an element of risk. I mean, your risk is not just money. Your risk is your time. Your risk is putting yourself out there, which is scary. Your risk is people are going to say, there's a famous expression by Steven Spielberg, the famous movie producer, which I think is the most brilliant, insightful, to the point, about people should remember when you're trying to start a business, and keep this in mind. remember what I'm saying, and your audience should all listen. Whenever you're trying to, generally anything, but particularly when you're trying to start, no matter a little business, is that a good idea is a bad idea until it's a good idea.
Say that one more time for my audience
Yeah,
that might
I
not have
will.
understood the first
Hey,
time.
a good idea is a bad idea until it's a good idea.
Meaning, it may
Meaning
not work.
that,
It may
meaning
not
very
work right
simple.
away, but it will work for you.
Yeah, no, meanings, it may or may not. That's not, no. Meaning that when you talk about something in the beginning, if you look at anything, most people, you think about, don't have much, are not generally positive about. Like, it could be the best thing. But when people first conceive what we take for granted, Instagram, LinkedIn, some of them hit gold right away and overnight thing. But most things start off and struggle and meet all kinds of, objections, criticisms, skepticism of all kind. Until, of course, if it gets on its feet and lands and survives and starts to get traction eventually, which may take time because the entrepreneur sacrificed everything in sweat and toil, and people start to gravitate it, then it becomes a great idea.
Myron, you have Seal, you have Heidi Klum, you've dealt with the Patriots, the Garden, Radio City. What's your next big deal? Maybe you can't leak it, but I always feel like people who are deal makers always working on something. So any big deal that we can hear from Myron Welik in the coming future in 2024?
It's just that I'm starting a little startup called I Want to Grow. And that's basically all to say is going to be, besides my real estate, believe it or not, we're going to try to build a platform. Because I always wish I had this when I was trying to find strategic partners, Alex, a platform where, think Tinder for business, democratize the search for strategic partners. People can go on, hopefully at some point, and be able to scroll, whether they're a flower shop in New York or a big chain, it doesn't matter, in Chicago or London, and scroll potential warm decision-making contacts for strategic partnerships and reach out to them.
And then on that same vein, people can always reach out to you for consulting because it sounds like you're not done consulting anytime soon or helping the next wide-eyed entrepreneur build their business.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to reach out to me, I'm always, is through LinkedIn, which is pretty easy, I guess.
And that would be, if I spell it right, MyronWelik.
Correct.
And then podcasts, are you on Apple, Spotify?
Yeah, the podcast is not active right now because I'm so busy, to be quite frank, called the Jackhammer Effect. It is, and it's past, but I'm so busy trying to build, doing my thing. And I really haven't had time to do it. So I'm a guest on podcasts like yours, on it as much as I can, and busy with, real estate and busy with trying to build my little startup here. That's certainly enough on my plate for now.
Well, I'll tell you, Myron, when that startup comes back, is alive and well and built up, come back and talk about it. Maybe if there's a launch party in New York, would love to be part of that.
Oh, I think I'd love to have a large party. Actually, there's probably no other city, a few other cities, I should say, in the world that I'd love to make it, because the expression says, when you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I believe that.
Well, I will tell you,
I love New York, and I believe, and I think they love entrepreneurs, and they're very, my gut feeling and what I've read, New Yorkers are, if something makes sense, or could be, it's fair, that makes sense, are good early adapters, are good customers. They're good early adapters.
I think so. I've seen it every day here in New York, and
Exactly.
we're always trying to get people off their feet that are on their feet that might be down also, because there's a lot of that going on around here, and it's we got to keep inspiring more adaptation.
Right. I agree.
Well,
Absolutely.
Myron Welik, this has been a great hour, and I'd love to have you back on for another podcast.
It'd be my honor sometime in the future. It would be absolutely a pleasure to meet you, buddy. I really have.
And my pleasure here. And thank you to, again, podcastguest.com for making this connection. And
Thank you.
Myron, thanks for reaching out to our show. I was going to say, what inspired you to reach out? Because it's been a great connect.
Say it again. Sorry.
I was going to say, what inspired you to reach out? Because actually you had submitted feedback to my podcast, and that's how I got in touch with you. What was your inspiration?
I love the theme, and for what I perceived it to be. So I thought there was a chemistry and affinity that would make sense. And that's why I reached out.
Well, I'm glad you did, and we'll have you back on it for sure as your project gets off the ground running.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much, Alex. Appreciate it, buddy.